often find that you've a nice dry week gone by there. People feel that maybe another week's grass to go, and that they're delaying the housing until that. Maybe if you're within a shout of housing and you've got the O's nice and dry, maybe that's the time to move and get them in.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Sheep specialist Damian Costello joins us on this week's episode as we discuss winter housing. Damian talks us about some of the key considerations of housing, from penning to space allowance. We also discuss straw usage, alternative bedding and keeping slats clean during the winter. We finish up discussing housing for organic flocks. We hear now from Damian.
Obviously, I suppose the factors that influence when people will house their ewes, if that's their system on the farm. Obviously, grass growth has been probably a challenging year for grass in 2024. That somewhat recovered, I suppose, in the back end of the year. But with the dry ground conditions and that, maybe on farms where there are also cattle on the farm, they remained out a bit longer than normal because of the good ground conditions. So maybe grass that normally would be there on sheep farms has disappeared a bit quicker. So and again, a function of the stocking rate of sheep on the farm as well as to when people will house. Other factors, I suppose, are in terms of the condition of the ewes. Have people secured adequate supplies of straw? Have they enough of silage or hay or forage in the yard to carry the sheep over a particular housing period? And obviously then the weather is a big factor, in terms of when people would house. So as I said, look, the body condition is an important one, particularly, and as you said, if you were looking maybe to house gradually, maybe going through the ewes at this stage and picking out the ones of the thinner ewes or the ones of lesser body condition, and maybe starting with housing some of them.
It probably is one way, Damien, is stretching out supply, but you just touch on something else there. Like, we're talking about body condition too. We can maybe overlook it a little in mid-pregnancy, and to stretch that grazing season on a bit longer, we should maybe not give them enough at this time of year either.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've often talked, I suppose, about grazing out paddocks and closing up for the winter and planning for spring grass. It's still not a time, I suppose, that you should be overly forcing ewes in terms of look at ewes that are in really good body condition at mating time, are maybe able to tolerate a little bit more in terms of putting them under a little bit more pressure. But then you'll always have the outliers in every flock that are maybe just marginally at or where you'd like them to be at mating time, and they will be the first to slip back in body condition if grass supplies are tight or there's no supplementation. So it probably is a time, regardless of whether you're going housing or not, that you go through the ewes and identify the thin ones and separate them out for preferential feeding.
If we are talking though about housing, just in terms of managing around housing, like, what are a couple of key things we need to consider? And
yeah, look, as I say, we've often said, I suppose, having the housing ready to go in good time before you're planning to house, in terms of washing out and any repairs or maintenance or anything that needed to be carried out on the housing during the summer period, I suppose. Really important, I suppose, that you're not housing sheep that are very wet. If you house yours with very wet fleeces, it can take up to a week for them to dry out. It creates a damp atmosphere in the shed. That the knock-on effect of that can be sort of respiratory conditions. I suppose we often find that you've a nice dry week gone by there. People feel that maybe another week's grass to go, and they're delaying the housing until that. Maybe if you're within a shout of housing, and you've got the ewes nice and dry, maybe that's the time to move and get them in, or get some of them in at least. Again, if it's particularly inclement weather or particularly wet weather, maybe the option of housing them in smaller batches and spreading them throughout the shed, and some things like leaving the doors of the sheds open to try and get them to dry out. But again, look at ideally housing dry sheep is important from a lot of aspects really.
Look, it probably takes a little bit of planning, like for the sake of going an extra couple of days and last minute panic as opposed to, right, set yourself up, we're going to put these in and batch them that way. Like long term, we're only talking a couple of days either way. As you said, you're better off having them dry in, ready, and be settled in.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and because I say, the other factor I suppose we mentioned straw there, and people are, people are looking at the cost of straw and everything. Maybe a gradual approach, to housing can be the thing. Under no circumstances, people that have been closing up fields for the last 6 or 8 weeks for spring grass. Under no circumstances, there has been growth, but you should leave that grass until the spring, because under no circumstances should you regraze those fields, because it'll be worth far more to you in the springtime. And a lot of the winter growth takes place in the early part of the winter, so it's not a good idea in an effort to delay housing. So, like as I say, if you could prioritize, as I say, going through the ewes, picking out the thinner ewes to house first if you're looking at a gradual approach to housing. Older ewes then are probably more likely to have teeth issues and that, so they would be another priority bunch that you could pick out to house first if you're staggering the housing. And when you reach scanning or after, you'd be looking at probably getting in a lot of the sheep at that stage. But if you were still leaving some sheep out, maybe the triplet bearing ewes or the ewes that are first due to lamb based on rattle colour, could be the next priority, I suppose, in terms of housing if you're talking about a staggered approach to it.
What other considerations there should we have before we house them?
Lameness is an issue, I suppose, that a housing environment can, if you have clinically lame sheep in a flock, it's something that can spread really rapidly in a house situation. So I suppose from a prevention point of view, foot bathing all ewes before housing, and again to continue during the housing period. Anytime you'd have your sheep out for particularly for other, for pre-lambing vaccinations or that kind of thing. So routine foot bathing before and during the housing period. But again, if you have a number of lame ewes, particularly ewes that have some form of infectious lameness, such as foot rot or cod or that, you talk to your vet, you separate out these lame ones, treat them appropriately. As I say, on veterinary advice, it is an antibiotic needed by all means, and trying to keep those in a separate group. I suppose ideally, if you could leave them out until they're fully cleared up, but at least, I suppose, maybe to pen those on their own in a separate pen, so they're not spreading infection throughout the shed. So important to go through the flock thoroughly and separate out any lame ones and treat them appropriately.
I think that's a useful point, Damian, cutting down that reservoir infection. And look, as you said, it stops the spreading, which can happen quite rapidly in that environment from now on. Look, when we're talking about penning in mid-pregnancy, Damian, is there anything else should be considering? Like you mentioned about tin ewes earlier, should we be looking at penning them up, spreading them out a little bit more at this stage, even pre-scanning?
Yeah, again, as I said, if it's a thing that that you're not housing all the ewes together, maybe you can pin, you can spread the ewes a little bit thinner around the shed. If you're looking at building a little bit of body condition on the thinner group of ewes, the mid-pregnancy period is a time where it's possible to achieve this. Whether that's with really high quality silage up in the 70s DMD silage, you'll gain a bit of body condition, or if they're a group where or if you're in a situation where the silage quality is not as good, that you may be introducing a bit of concentrates to them. So look at the other thing is, I suppose, these lighter, thinner ewes, or even the lame group of ewes, when you come to the stage where you're feeding concentrates to all the sheep, they will tend to be the ones that are getting pushed aside in terms of they won't be as competitive for feed. So, pinning these on their own. These thinner ones is the appropriate thing to do. And then when you get as far as scanning stage, you're obviously dividing them based on litter size. If you've done your rattling very well, you can maybe separate out the earlier and the later lambers within the group as well in terms of penning them, and you can be more accurate then, I suppose, about the late pregnancy feeding of the different groups. But again, look, a lot depends on the housing and having enough pen divisions as well, and that. So.
Look, we're just moving on that. It's no harm either mentioned in terms of the space, feed space requirements, laying space requirements. It can sometimes be a little deceptive what we can actually fit into a pen at this time of the year and what we should fit into a pen at this time of the year. Would you just maybe outline what they should be and the reason for that?
Yeah, it is, and look, it's probably maybe one of the most common things you'd see in sheep sheds is the department have outlined fairly clearly, I suppose, the floor space or the pen space requirements per ewe, and also the feeding space requirements, particularly in terms of when it comes to feeding concentrates. And very often you would find a shed that's okay for floor space, but is maybe a bit tight for feeding space. And I mean, if you take the example of your typical sort of 85 to 85 kilo, 90 kilo lowland ewe, in terms of a straw bedded shed, like they need 1.4 meters squared of a floor space. But more importantly, and maybe what we find maybe more often than that isn't being achieved, is that they need 600 millimeters per head of a feed space. So if you take the average, if you take the standard 4.8 meter bay where you're feeding your concentrates along the front barrier, 8 of these large framed ewes is all that will comfortably eat at the front of per bay, and very often we find that there's more than that. So, it's not to say that you can't address that. I mean, people can put in even extra trocks or a hang-on trough or something that will take the extra couple of, or will allow the extra bit of space to these ewes. And look, it is a good exercise to do, to get someone with you and have your measuring tape and just check what the feed space is in each pen. And sometimes you look into a shed and all pens appear the same, but there can be slight variations in the size and so on. So measure each pen and see what's the appropriate number of ewes that should be in that from a feed space point of view, and also just check then that they've enough of floor space. And you'll find with overcrowded pens or from the floor space point of view, in straw bedded situations, it's difficult to keep bedding clean. If there's thin ewes in the pen, they'll start to get thinner because there's bullying and so on. And then from a feed space point of view, you'll find these weaker ewes or thinner ewes, they won't compete for feed, and their body condition will suffer accordingly. And the second thing is you can have issues like prolapse occurring and the other metabolic diseases such as milk fever or twin lamb disease or that. So it's important, really, what you're trying to achieve is that all ewes are getting a fair crack at the feed you're offering to them.
There is that bit of false economy overcrowding pens at this stage of the season. David, Look, in terms of management in pens, I suppose maybe if we deal with the straw one first, maybe in terms of bedding use of straw over the winter, I know there's a reluctance there that we'll use a lot, maybe use of alternatives. What are the options for people? How much would you be budgeting for the year, and are any of the alternatives a runner?
Yeah, again, I suppose that there's guidelines in terms of the straw requirement. The first thing I suppose you'd say is that with drier type forage like hay or haylage, there's probably a lower requirement. The department requirements sort of state per 100 days of housing period. Again, there'll be lots of ewes that'll be housed for substantially less than 100 days, but it's 45 kilograms per 100 days for sheep that are feeding on hay as their main source of forage. For silage, then it's about 72 kilograms per 100 days. and they describe that like as similar to four small square bales, if you like to say, the standard square bale. So it's a little bit less than half a round bale, I suppose, in terms of the requirement. But look, at a lot of people from experience have a fair idea of how much what their straw requirement is. Um, the one thing I'd say, like as well, is people, if your shed is poorly ventilated and there's a damp atmosphere in the shed, and uh, you're going to find difficult, those guidelines that say are for well constructed, well ventilated sheds, sort of thing. So if you have a damp atmosphere in the shed because of poor ventilation, you're going to use a lot more straw. I suppose in terms of, you wouldn't be changing over to feeding hay just for the sake of saving a little bit on straw, because you just need to watch the feed value. By and large, and it's not across the board, but by and large, there's probably a better chance of high feed value silage than high feed value hay from a sheep point of view. And as you said, there's been lots of talk in recent years over the likes of the alternatives. To me, they don't seem to replace any. They don't replace straw entirely. We've had people, maybe they were putting down a little bit of sawdust at the base to form a bit of soakage, and putting a bit of straw on top, and maybe reducing the overall amount of straw. A lot of people were using the likes of wood chip and that, but I think any work that was carried out on that type of bedding material found that hygiene, I suppose, was the big problem. They got dirty quite quickly. And in the likes of the wood chip as well, it was very slow to break down. So land spreading it with the farmyard manure as normal maybe wasn't always just as simple as it sounds. It could be lying in the field, so it may be more appropriate to a situation where you'd be ploughing in the bedding material. Lime is probably an underutilized one. Again, it's one that it's big advantage, I suppose. It's kind of absorbent, and it'll help keep the bedding drier for longer. And people tend to use it maybe particularly along the feed barriers where sheep are spending a lot of time. And again, it seems to have a positive impact from a lameness point of view. Look, it has certain disinfectant properties, but I think more importantly, it keeps the environment drier, which I suppose is less conducive to lameness, or the spread of lameness as well.
Just one of the practical tips you can implement. Look, on the slatted one, and often as one of the big considerations here is silage being pulled in, particularly when it's round-bale silage we're feeding. Damien, any tips around keeping that clean or managing that during the
Yeah, and as you said, look, it is one of the drawbacks, I suppose, that if you're feeding anything other than finely chopped silage, there is a certain amount of material being pulled into the slats, and if that goes unmanaged, I suppose it doesn't take very long until it starts to clog up the slats. So look, I think it's regular kind of sweeping out or sweeping up of these bits of material pulled in. People will count that another chore, I suppose. Maybe look, if you have the slats, you're obviously not bedding that area as well, so you have a little bit of, you're saving a little bit on time there. But I find I've seen on farms a lot of people use even a plastic garden rake where they can, if that's done on a daily basis, it will collect a lot of that before it begins to clog up the slats. Like, so it's a matter of an ongoing thing rather than waiting until if it's left unchecked, it becomes a big issue, and it's a big power washing job or something to try and unblock the slats and clean them again.
clog completely. Look, maybe just finally in terms of organics, and look, we've high producers going in there in conversion at the moment, some are fully converted over. The requirements are slightly different in that. You might just outline them for us again.
They are a little bit, Kieran. Yeah. There's firstly, I suppose there's a bigger floor area requirement in terms of again. Look, there'll be a lot of organic sheep farmers will be operating an outwintering system, which is fine. Again, whether it is organic or conventional, the importance, I suppose, of ensuring that you're you're complying with the cross-compliance regulations for outwintering of stock. And the other thing, I suppose, the sheep farmers that are participating in acres, it's no harm to check, what the regulations are for the various different areas of the farm in terms of are there any restrictions, I suppose, on supplementary feeding based on your acres plan. But going back to your question, I suppose for people that are housing in an organic situation, there's a bigger floor requirement of 1.5 meters per head for adult ewes. It's 0.35 meters squared for lambs. And the other thing, and people that have joined organics will be aware of this, that 100% slatted accommodation does not meet the organic standards. So in some cases, people that had this had to modify their housing a little bit. So you must provide at least a similar sized area as a solid straw bedded layback. So if you have whatever size of an area, you must have the same again or greater of a straw bedded layback to provide for the. And again, that's I suppose maybe from an animal welfare point of view. The other question maybe the people ask here about the organic thing is that it's not a requirement to purchase your straw from a fellow organic participant. Non-organic straw can be used for bedding in an organic system.
Damian, look, I appreciate that. It's certainly a useful piece of information at the moment. Good having you on.
No problem. Thanks, Kieran.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. For updates on the sheep programme, you can keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.